In the heart of Wakanda, beneath the sacred mountain where kings received their power, T'Challa knelt in the ancestral plane. Purple light suffused the realm between life and death, and before him stood the spirits of every Black Panther who had come before. His father T'Chaka, his grandfather, warriors and scholars stretching back through centuries. They spoke to him of duty, of wisdom, of the balance between isolationism and intervention that every Wakandan king must navigate. But something was wrong. The ancestral plane shuddered. The purple light flickered, replaced by something else. A brilliance that was neither spiritual nor physical. A force that sang with the voices of trillions of lives across impossible distances. T'Challa felt reality fracture around him, felt the connection to Bast stretch and twist, as energies that should never have touched collided in a moment of cosmic coincidence. "T'Challa," his father's voice called out, but it was already fading, the ancestral plane dissolving into chaos. And then there was only light. When consciousness returned, T'Challa found himself lying on a rooftop he didn't recognize, in a city that defied comprehension. He pushed himself up, his enhanced muscles responding instantly, his tactical mind already assessing the situation even as his senses struggled to process what they were telling him. The sky above was wrong, filled with vehicles, thousands of them, streaming between buildings that towered kilometers into the atmosphere. The air tasted of ozone and exhaust, and the ambient noise was a symphony of sounds he'd never heard. His Panther habit was intact, the vibranium weave responding to his neural commands as it always had. He activated his helmet, and the heads-up display came online, immediately attempting to connect to Wakandan satellites that didn't exist here, to networks that had never been built. "Griot," he said, summoning his AI assistant. Silence. Whatever had brought him here had severed his connection to Wakanda's technology network. He was alone, cut off, in a place that logic said couldn't exist. An explosion nearby made his decision for him. T'Challa moved to the rooftop's edge and looked down to see the street below erupting in chaos. Strange machines, droids, his mind supplied, though from what science fiction he couldn't say, were attacking what appeared to be soldiers in white armor. Civilians fled in panic as energy weapons carved through the air, and T'Challa's enhanced hearing picked up screams in languages he'd never heard. But fear was universal. Terror needed no translation. T'Challa didn't hesitate. A king protected his people, and if he was here, wherever here was, then these people needed protection. He leaped from the rooftop, his vibranium suit absorbing the impact as he landed in the midst of the battle. His claws extended with a metallic snick, and he moved. The droids never saw him coming. T'Challa's enhanced speed and combat mastery honed through. Years of training and actual warfare made him a blur of motion. His claws, vibranium, the strongest metal on Earth, carved through the droid's chassis like paper. One droid turned its weapon toward him, and T'Challa's suit absorbed the energy blast, storing it in the vibranium weave. He redirected the kinetic energy through a palm strike that sent another droid flying backwards into a wall. In 30 seconds, the immediate threat was neutralized. The white-armored soldiers, clone troopers, though T'Challa didn't know that yet, stared at him in stunned silence. One of them finally raised his rifle, not quite pointing it at T'Challa but clearly uncertain. "Identify yourself," the trooper said, his voice distorted through his helmet speakers. "I am T'Challa," he replied, retracting his claws as a gesture of peace. "King of Wakanda, and I appear to be very far from home." Before the trooper could respond, the air around them changed. T'Challa felt it, a presence, powerful and focused, approaching with impossible speed. His connection to Bast, weakened by whatever had brought him here, still functioned enough to warn him of danger. Or perhaps not danger, but certainly power. 3 figures landed on the street with barely a sound, 2 men and a woman, all wearing robes of tan and brown, each carrying a cylindrical device at their belt. The older of the 2 men, with auburn hair graying at the temples and a beard that spoke of wisdom earned through experience, stepped forward, "I am Jedi Master Mace Windu," he said, his voice carrying absolute authority. "And I think you and I need to talk about how you just destroyed 6 battle droids with your bare hands." T'Challa studied the man before him, his tactical mind processing everything. The bearing of a warrior, the confidence of a leader, the wariness of someone who'd seen too much violence. He recognized a kindred spirit, someone who carried the weight of command. "I'd be happy to talk, Master Windu," T'Challa said, deactivating his helmet so they could see his face. "But first, perhaps you can tell me where I am. This isn't Earth. This isn't even my universe, is it?" Mace Windu's expression shifted. Surprise, quickly masked, replaced by intense focus. "No," he said slowly. "I don't believe it is. Come with us. The Council will want to hear this." The Jedi Temple rose above Coruscant like a monument to an ancient age, its architecture blending stone and metal in ways that spoke of thousands of years of history. As they traveled through the city in what T'Challa learned was called a speeder, he listened intently while Mace Windu explained the basics of this galaxy. The Republic, the Separatists, the Clone Wars that had engulfed countless worlds. "You're peacekeepers," T'Challa observed. "But you're leading armies." "That's a contradiction, Master Windu." "One we're painfully aware of," Mace replied, and T'Challa heard genuine conflict in the man's voice. "The Jedi were never meant to be generals. We're guardians of peace and justice. But when the Separatists attacked, when systems began falling to their droid armies, the Republic needed leaders who could fight. We didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice," T'Challa said gently. "Though sometimes all the choices are difficult ones. Wakanda faced a similar dilemma, whether to remain isolated and protect our people, or engage with the world and risk everything we'd built. I chose engagement, but it cost us." They landed at the temple, and T'Challa was escorted through halls filled with beings of species he'd never imagined. Some were humanoid, others decidedly not, but all wore the same robes, all carried themselves with the same disciplined purpose. He saw younglings, children, he realized, training with practice weapons, their movements coordinated and precise. "You train them young," T'Challa observed. "We must," said a new voice. A female Jedi, Shakti, as she introduced herself, had joined them. "The Force is powerful, but without training, it can be dangerous. To the user and to others." "The Force," T'Challa repeated. Mace had mentioned it during their journey, this energy field that bound all living things, that gave the Jedi their abilities. It reminded him of Bast's power, of the spiritual energy that connected all Black Panthers to their ancestors. Different in execution, perhaps, but similar in principle. The council chamber was circular and austere, with 12 seats arranged in a circle and tall windows offering a view of the endless cityscape. In those seats sat the Jedi High Council, the wisest and most powerful Jedi in the galaxy. T'Challa recognized the weight of command in their bearing. These were leaders who'd seen empires rise and fall, who carried the responsibility of an entire order. A small, ancient being with green skin and pointed ears gestured for T'Challa to approach. "Master Yoda, I am," the creature said in a syntax that took T'Challa a moment to parse. "Strange circumstances brought you here. Stranger still, your abilities are. Explain, you will." T'Challa stood in the center of the circle and did something he rarely did. He told the truth, completely and without reservation. He explained Wakanda, the heart-shaped herb, the vibranium that powered his technology. He spoke of the ancestral plane, of Bast's blessing, of the moment when reality tore and deposited him in this galaxy. "Show us," requested a dark-skinned Corran Jedi. Another Mace Windu, T'Challa noted, though the name structure confused him. "These abilities you mentioned." T'Challa activated his suit's kinetic absorption, then struck the floor with his palm. The stored energy from the earlier battle released in a shock wave that rippled across the chamber's surface. Controlled, precise, and undeniably powerful. His claws extended, vibranium gleaming in the afternoon light. The herb enhanced everything about me, he explained. Strength, speed, reflexes, senses. The suit absorbs kinetic energy and allows me to redirect it. And Wakanda's technology. He paused, realizing the limitation. Most of which I can't access here, but the fundamentals remain. Feel the force in you I do not, Yoda observed. Yet aware of it, you seem to be. How? I serve Bast, the Panther god, T'Challa said. Through her, I'm connected to all the Black Panthers who came before me. It's a spiritual connection, not unlike what you describe as the Force. Perhaps the two are related, different expressions of the same fundamental energy. A Syrian Jedi leaned forward. I am Ki-Adi-Mundi. Your combat effectiveness is impressive, but you're one warrior. This war spans the entire galaxy, with billions of droids and millions of clone soldiers. What possible difference could one person make? T'Challa smiled slightly. Master Ki-Adi-Mundi, I've heard that question before, usually from people who've never had to defend something they love against impossible odds. One person can make all the difference, if they choose their battles wisely and fight them intelligently. Spoken like a true warrior, Mace Windu said with approval. But Ki-Adi-Mundi raises a valid point. You're displaced, cut off from your home and your resources. What do you intend to do? What I've always done, T'Challa replied. Protect those who need protection. Oppose tyranny. Seek justice. If these separatists are truly the threat you describe, if they're enslaving worlds and crushing freedom, then they're no different from the enemies I've faced in my own universe. I may be one warrior, but I'm a warrior who's never stopped fighting for what's right. He looked around at the council, meeting each of their gazes in turn. But I also offer something else. Perspective. You're Jedi, peacekeepers forced into war. You're struggling with the contradiction between your principles and your actions. Wakanda struggled with similar questions. Perhaps I can help you navigate that conflict. Perhaps together we can find a way to end this war that doesn't require you to abandon everything you believe in. The council members exchanged glances, and T'Challa could see the debate happening in their subtle expressions and small gestures. Finally, Yoda spoke. Wise words, those are. And truth, they contain. But trust, we must build. Prove yourself, you must. I understand, T'Challa said. What would you have me do? Before anyone could answer, alarms began wailing throughout the temple. A Jedi burst into the chamber, his young face flushed with urgency. Masters, Separatist forces have launched a surprise attack on the Senate building. They're trying to capture Senator Amidala. The council erupted into coordinated action. Mace Windu was already moving toward the door. Obi-Wan, Anakin, you're closest to the Senate. Get there now. The rest of you coordinate the temple's defenses in case this is a diversion. I'm coming with you, T'Challa said, falling into step beside Mace. You don't have to. A leader is in danger, T'Challa interrupted. In Wakanda, we protect our leaders. It seems like a good place to start proving myself, wouldn't you say? Mace Windu allowed himself a small smile. Indeed it would. Let's move. They took a speeder, Mace piloting with the casual expertise of someone who'd done this thousands of times, racing through Coruscant's traffic toward the Senate building. T'Challa used the flight to observe the city, his tactical mind cataloging escape routes, defensive positions, patterns in the traffic flow that could be exploited or defended. You think like a strategist, Mace observed, noting T'Challa's focus. I am a strategist, T'Challa replied. Wakanda has fought wars, Master Windu. We've faced enemies who outnumbered us, who had superior technology, who thought they could conquer us through force. We survived because we fought smart, not just hard. If I'm going to help you in this war, that's what I can offer. Not just another warrior, but another mind. They arrived at the Senate building to find it under heavy assault. Battle droids swarmed the entrance, their blasters filling the air with crimson energy. Clone troopers fought desperately to hold the line, but they were being pushed back, overwhelmed by sheer numbers. And coordinating the defense were two more Jedi, a young man with sandy hair and intense blue eyes, and a Togruta girl whose orange skin and distinctive head tails marked her as something exotic even in this diverse galaxy. "Anakin, Ahsoka," Mace called out. "Status? Bad and getting worse." The young man, Anakin, shouted back, his lightsaber deflecting a stream of blaster bolts. "They've got droidekas moving in, and our forces are too scattered to mount an effective defense." T'Challa's enhanced vision picked out the tactical situation instantly. The clone troopers were brave but disorganized, falling back in separate groups with no coordination. The droids were pressing a wedge formation, designed to split the defenders and create breakthrough points. And approaching from two side corridors were the heavy droids Anakin had mentioned, rolling spheres that unfolded into walking weapons platforms with energy shields. "Master Windu," T'Challa said quickly, "I need you to trust me. Can you coordinate the clone troopers? Get them to fall back to that central position, form a unified line?" "What are you planning?" "Something I learned fighting in Wakanda," T'Challa said, and activated his suit's stealth mode. The vibranium weave shifted, bending light around him until he vanished from sight. "Sometimes the best defense is a surgical offense. Give me 30 seconds. He moved before Mace could argue, his enhanced speed carrying him across the battlefield like a shadow. The droids couldn't see him, couldn't target him, and by the time they realized something was wrong, it was too late. T'Challa's claws tore through their ranks, targeting power cores and central processors with surgical precision. He used his stored kinetic energy to blast apart clustered groups, then recharged by absorbing their return fire. The droidekas presented a problem. Their shields were too strong for direct assault, but T'Challa had fought enemies with energy shields before. He grabbed a destroyed battle droid's chassis and hurled it at one droideka's shield. The shield flared, momentarily overloading as it absorbed the impact. In that split second of vulnerability, T'Challa was there, his claws finding the gaps in the droid's armor. 30 seconds later, the Separatist assault had collapsed. Destroyed droids littered the Senate building's entrance, and the clone troopers were staring in amazement at the space where something invisible had just decimated an entire attack force. T'Challa deactivated his stealth mode, appearing in the midst of the carnage. Anakin Skywalker laughed in disbelief. "Okay, who are you and where can I get one of those suits?" "T'Challa, King of Wakanda," he replied, extending a hand. "And the suit is complicated. I'm Anakin, and this is my Padawan, Ahsoka Tano," the young Jedi said, shaking T'Challa's hand with genuine enthusiasm. "That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of incredible things." "The senator," T'Challa reminded them. "Is she safe?" "Thanks to you, yes," said a new voice. A woman emerged from the Senate building, beautiful, regal, with brown hair and eyes that spoke of intelligence and determination. She wore the formal robes of a Republic senator, but T'Challa saw the warrior beneath the diplomat. This was someone who'd fought her own battles, in her own way. "Senator Padme Amidala," she introduced herself, "and I owe you my life, it seems. Though I'm curious, who sends a king to rescue a senator?" "No one sent me, Senator," T'Challa replied. "I simply saw someone in danger and responded. Where I come from, leaders have a responsibility to protect their people, all their people." Padme's expression softened with respect. "Then your people are fortunate to have you." As Republic forces secured the building and medics tended to the wounded, Mace Windu approached T'Challa with a thoughtful expression. "You fight like someone who's commanded armies," the Jedi Master observed, "who's made life and death decisions, who's carried the weight of a nation on his shoulders." "Because I have," T'Challa said simply. "And I suspect you have too, Master Windu. I recognize the burden of leadership when I see it." "Then you understand what I'm about to ask," Mace said. "The Jedi Council has a proposition for you. We'd like you to accompany us on a mission, a critical one. We're planning an assault to liberate the planet Ryloth from Separatist occupation. Your tactical mind and combat abilities could make the difference between success and catastrophic failure." "And in return?" T'Challa asked. "In return, we help you find a way home," Mace replied. "The Force works in mysterious ways, King T'Challa. If it brought you here, perhaps it can send you back. But first, Help us save a world." T'Challa looked at the Senate building, at the clone troopers standing guard, at Anakin and Ahsoka talking quietly with Senator Amidala. He thought of Wakanda, of his responsibilities there, of Shuri and Okoye and all the people depending on him. But he also thought of what his father had taught him, that a good king doesn't just protect his own people. He protects all people who need protection. And in this moment, in this galaxy far from home, an entire world needed help. "I'll go," T'Challa said. "But know this, Master Windu, I fight for justice, not for politics. If I see something wrong, even within your republic, I'll speak out. My alliance is with what's right, not with any government." "I wouldn't expect anything less," Mace replied, and extended his hand. "Welcome to the Clone Wars, King T'Challa. May the Force be with you." T'Challa shook his hand firmly. "And may Bast guide us both." As they prepared to depart, as T'Challa boarded a Republic cruiser for the first time and saw the stars stretch into hyperspace, he felt the echo of his ancestors' voices, not as clearly as in the ancestral plane, but present nonetheless. They were with him, even here, even across the void between realities. He was T'Challa, King of Wakanda, the Black Panther, and he would prove that even in a galaxy at war, even in a conflict not his own, one person fighting for what was right could change everything. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Republic cruiser Resolute cut through hyperspace, its engines humming with barely contained power as it carried T'Challa toward his first major engagement in this galactic war. He stood in the ship's observation deck, watching the streaking star lines that represented faster-than-light travel, and marveled at the technological achievement. Wakanda had advanced technology, certainly, but nothing like this. Nothing that could cross the distances between stars in hours rather than lifetimes. Impressive, isn't it? Anakin Skywalker appeared beside him, the young Jedi's presence announced only by T'Challa's enhanced hearing. "I've been flying through hyperspace for years, and it still gets me sometimes. All that distance, compressed into something we can actually traverse. In my world, we've barely begun to explore our own solar system," T'Challa replied. "This galaxy has mastered technologies we can only dream of, and yet you're still fighting wars, still struggling with the same questions of right and wrong that plagued humanity thousands of years ago." "Technology doesn't solve everything," Anakin said with a slight grimace. "Trust me, I've learned that the hard way. You can have all the advanced weapons in the galaxy, but if you're fighting for the wrong reasons, or if you don't know why you're fighting at all..." He trailed off, his expression troubled. T'Challa studied the young Jedi carefully. Anakin Skywalker was powerful. That much was obvious, even to someone who couldn't sense the Force directly. But there was something else, something that reminded T'Challa of warriors he'd known who carried too much weight, who pushed themselves too hard, who let their passion override their judgment. "You question this war," T'Challa observed. "Not whether the Republic should fight, but how, and what it's costing you." Anakin's eyes widened slightly. "How did you—" "I'm a king," T'Challa said gently. "Reading people is part of the job, and I've seen that look before, on the faces of my own warriors when I asked them to do things that challenged their principles. You're a peacekeeper forced to be a general. It conflicts with who you are. The Jedi Code teaches us to avoid attachment, to serve without emotion," Anakin said, his voice carrying an edge of frustration. "But how can you fight for people without caring about them? How can you protect the innocent without feeling anger at those who hurt them? Sometimes I think the code is wrong. Or maybe I'm just not good enough to follow it. Or perhaps," T'Challa suggested, "the code was written for a different time, a time of peace, when detachment made sense. But war changes everything, Anakin. It forces you to adapt, to question old assumptions. Wakanda had its own codes, its own traditions that demanded we remain isolated from the world. I broke those traditions because the world needed us. That doesn't make me a bad king. It makes me one willing to evolve, Before Anakin could respond, Ahsoka's voice crackled over the intercom. "Master, the General wants everyone in the briefing room. We're dropping out of hyperspace in 10 minutes. The briefing room was packed with Jedi, clone officers, and military strategists. Holographic displays showed Ryloth, a planet of purple-skinned beings called Twi'leks, currently under brutal separatist occupation. The tactical situation was grim. Wat Tambor, the separatist commander, had established a network of defensive positions that made a frontal assault nearly impossible. Mace Windu stood at the center of the room, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Our objective is clear: liberate Ryloth and free its people from separatist control. But Tambor isn't going to make it easy. He's fortified the capital city, Lesu, and he's using the civilian population as shields. Any direct assault will result in massive casualties." "Then we don't make a direct assault," T'Challa said, stepping forward to examine the holographic display. All eyes turned to him, some curious, others skeptical. He was still an outsider here, still unproven beyond the single engagement at the Senate building. "What do you suggest?" asked Obi-Wan Kenobi, another Jedi Master who joined the mission. He had a diplomatic bearing that reminded T'Challa of international negotiations, of careful words and measured responses. T'Challa studied the hologram, his tactical mind processing the terrain, the defensive positions, the distribution of forces. Tambor has made a classic mistake. He's concentrated his forces to maximize his defensive capability, but in doing so, he's created a single point of failure. If we can infiltrate the city, reach his command center, and neutralize his leadership, the rest of his forces will fall into disarray. "Infiltrate a fortified city," one of the clone commanders, Commander Cody, said skeptically. "Their sensors would detect us long before we got close enough to matter." "Not if you're using conventional approaches," T'Challa agreed. "But my suit has stealth capabilities. I can get past their sensors, and if you have other assets, Jedi who specialize in stealth operations, small teams trained for covert insertion, we can create multiple infiltration points. While Tambor's focused on defending against your frontal assault, we hit him where he's weakest." Mace Windu leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "It's risky. If the infiltration teams are discovered, they'll be trapped behind enemy lines with no support." "All warfare is risk," T'Challa replied. "But calculated risk, based on sound intelligence and proper planning, is how smaller forces defeat larger ones. Wakanda has done it for centuries. Let me show you how." Over the next hour, T'Challa worked with the Jedi and clone commanders to refine the plan. He was impressed by their professionalism, their willingness to listen despite his outsider status. The clone troopers in particular fascinated him. Genetically engineered soldiers, all identical, all programmed for absolute loyalty. It reminded him uncomfortably of slavery, though no one here seemed to see it that way. "These clones," T'Challa said quietly to Obi-Wan during a brief break, "they're created for war. They have no choice in whether they fight. Does that not trouble you?" Obi-Wan's expression grew somber. "It does, deeply, but the alternative was allowing the Separatists to conquer the Republic unopposed. We didn't have the time to build an army the conventional way, and the clones were available. It's one of many compromises we've made in this war. One of many things that keep me awake at night. Compromise is necessary in leadership," T'Challa acknowledged. "But there's a line between necessary compromise and moral surrender. Make sure you know where that line is, Master Kenobi. Because once you cross it, it becomes very difficult to find your way back." The Resolute dropped out of hyperspace above Ryloth, and immediately the battle began. Separatist frigates engaged the Republic fleet, filling space with turbo-laser fire and exploding fighters. T'Challa watched from the bridge as Anakin led a squadron of clone pilots in a daring assault on the Separatist flagship, his tactical instincts telling him that the young Jedi was taking unnecessary risks, pushing too hard, flying too close to the edge. But it worked. Anakin's squadron broke through the Separatist lines, and the Republic cruisers moved into position to begin their bombardment of the planetary shields. "That's our opening," Mace said. Infiltration teams, prepare for deployment. T'Challa joined Mace Windu, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and a squad of elite clone troopers in the dropship. As they descended through Ryloth's atmosphere, dodging anti-aircraft fire and separatist fighters, T'Challa activated his suit's systems, feeling the familiar hum of vibranium technology responding to his commands. "Stay close to me," Mace instructed. "The Force guides us in combat, helps us anticipate danger. You don't have that advantage." "I have Bast," T'Challa replied. And indeed, he could feel something, not the Force, exactly, but the spiritual connection that had sustained him through countless battles. The presence of his ancestors, watching, guiding. Different from what the Jedi described, but no less real. "And I have experience. Trust that I can handle myself, Master Windu." They landed on the outskirts of Lesu, and immediately T'Challa saw the devastation the Separatists had wrought. Buildings destroyed, streets littered with debris, and everywhere the signs of a population living under brutal occupation. Twi'lek civilians moved through the ruins with the hunched postures of the defeated, while battle droids patrolled in groups, their weapons ready to punish any sign of resistance. "This is wrong," Ahsoka whispered, her young face twisted with anger and disgust. "They're terrorizing these people." "War always falls hardest on civilians," T'Challa said quietly, memories of his own battles flooding back. "The powerful fight, and the powerless suffer. It's why wars must be ended quickly, decisively, and with minimal collateral damage. Every day this occupation continues, more innocents die." They moved through the city in teams, using the rubble for cover, T'Challa's stealth technology making him nearly invisible to the Separatist sensors. The Jedi relied on the Force to mask their presence, while the clone troopers used conventional camouflage and tactical discipline. It was a strange but effective combination of methods. T'Challa found himself paired with Mace Windu as they navigated toward the command center. The Jedi Master moved with fluid grace, his lightsaber ready but not ignited, his entire being focused on the mission. T'Challa recognized a kindred spirit, a warrior who transcended mere combat skill to achieve something closer to art. "You fight differently than other Jedi I've observed," T'Challa noted as they paused in an alley, waiting for a patrol to pass. "I practice Form 7, Vapad," Mace explained. "It's a controversial style, one that channels aggression and emotion into combat effectiveness. Most Jedi avoid it because it skirts dangerously close to the dark side. But I found it necessary in this war. Sometimes peace requires the willingness to do violence." "A philosophy Wakanda understands well," T'Challa said. "We're a peaceful nation, but we train every citizen in combat. We hope for peace, but prepare for war. It's the only way to protect what matters." A massive explosion rocked the city, the main Republic assault, right on schedule. As the Separatist forces scrambled to respond to the frontal attack, T'Challa and Mace made their move. The command center was a converted government building, its architecture beautiful even in its damaged state. Battle droids stood guard at every entrance, and sensor arrays swept the approaches. But T'Challa had fought in urban environments before, had learned to use terrain and timing to overcome superior numbers. He activated his stealth mode and moved like a shadow, his enhanced speed carrying him past the outer guards before they even registered movement. Inside, he found more droids and, more importantly, the layout of the facility. He memorized it in seconds. Exits, security stations, the route to the command center on the top floor. A droid turned in his direction, its sensors picking up something but not quite able to lock on. T'Challa didn't give it time to alert others. His claws found its processor, and it collapsed silently. Mace appeared beside him, having used the Force to cloud the guard's perceptions. "The others are in position. On your signal, we strike simultaneously." T'Challa opened a comm channel to all infiltration teams. "This is T'Challa. Begin assault in 3, 2, 1, now." The command center erupted in coordinated chaos. Jedi burst through doors, their lightsabers cutting through droids before the machines could respond. Clone troopers provided covering fire, their training evident in every precise shot. And T'Challa moved through it all like a force of nature, his vibranium suit absorbing blaster fire and redirecting it, his claws carving through droid after droid. They reached the command center to find Wat Tambor himself, a Ska Koan in a pressure suit, surrounded by tactical droids and a small army of security forces. The Separatist commander looked at them with cold, mechanical eyes. "Jedi," Tambor's mechanical voice droned. "You're too late. I've already transmitted the order to execute the hostages. By the time you reach them, thousands of Twi'leks will be dead." T'Challa's blood ran cold. Hostages. Tambor had prepared for this possibility, had planned to murder innocents as a final act of spite. It was exactly the kind of cruelty he'd fought against in his own world, the evil that made war necessary. "Where are they?" Mace demanded, his lightsaber steady but his voice tight with urgency. "The Plaza District," Tambor replied with what might have been satisfaction. 5 minutes, perhaps less. Not enough time to save them and capture me. You'll have to choose, Jedi. Justice or mercy. Your enemy or their victims." Mace Windu's face was stone, but T'Challa could see the conflict in his eyes. The Jedi wanted to capture Tambor, to end his threat permanently, but innocents were dying, and every second mattered. "Go," T'Challa said to Mace. "Save the hostages. I'll handle Tambor." "Alone?" Ahsoka protested. "There are too many droids." "I've faced worse odds," T'Challa interrupted. "And I don't need to capture him. I just need to keep him from escaping until you return. Trust me." Mace hesitated only a moment, then nodded. "May the Force be with you." "And Bast with you," T'Challa replied. The Jedi and clone troopers rushed from the command center, leaving T'Challa alone with Tambor and his guards. The Separatist commander's mechanical laughter echoed through the room. "Foolish! You've isolated yourself. My guards will tear you apart." "Your guards are machines," T'Challa said, and extended his claws. "I've been destroying machines since I arrived in this galaxy. Let's see if yours are any different." The battle droids opened fire, and T'Challa's suit drank in the energy, storing it, building it. He moved between them like water finding gaps in stone, his enhanced speed making him nearly impossible to target. His claws found joints and processors, dropping droids with surgical precision. The tactical droids were smarter, coordinating their fire, attempting to pin him down. But T'Challa had fought against AI before. Ultron's drones, advanced Wakandan training simulators, enemies who thought in pure logic. He understood how they processed information, how they predicted movement. He became unpredictable. T'Challa leaped onto a wall, using his suit's kinetic energy to propel himself at impossible angles. He bounced between surfaces, never staying in one position long enough for the droids to establish a firing solution. His claws flashed and droids fell. When the last guard collapsed, Tambor stood alone, his pressure suit his only defense. The Separatist commander backed toward a window, his mechanical voice taking on a note of panic. "Stay back! I'm a high-ranking member of the Techno Union. The Separatist Council will—" "I don't care about your titles," T'Challa said, advancing slowly. "I care about justice. You invaded this world. You enslaved its people. You ordered the execution of hostages. In Wakanda, we have a name for people like you. We call them tyrants, and we do not negotiate with tyrants." Tambor's hand moved toward a control device on his suit, probably a self-destruct or emergency beacon. T'Challa's enhanced reflexes let him cross the distance in a heartbeat, his hand closing around Tambor's wrist before the Separatist could activate whatever final measure he'd planned. "It's over," T'Challa said quietly. "Your occupation ends today." Mace Windu returned 20 minutes later with Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and the freed hostages. The Jedi Master's expression was grim but satisfied. They'd stopped the executions, saved the innocents. And now, with Tambor captured and his command structure broken, the Separatist forces on Ryloth were collapsing. "You held him," Mace observed, looking at where T'Challa stood guard over the bound Separatist commander, against an entire command center's worth of droids. I've fought for my country since I was old enough to wear the Panther habit, T'Challa replied simply. This was just another battle. No, Obi-Wan said thoughtfully. This was more than that. You gave us the chance to save those hostages. If you'd tried to do both, capture Tambor and save them yourself, you'd have failed at both. But you trusted us to handle one objective while you secured the other. That's not just combat skill, that's leadership. As they secured the command center and waited for Republic forces to arrive and occupy the city, T'Challa stood at the window, looking out over Lesu. Twi'lek civilians were emerging from hiding, their expressions shifting from fear to hope as they realized the occupation was ending. Children played in the streets for the first time in months. Families embraced. This was why he fought. Not for territory or politics or power. For this, the simple freedom of people to live their lives without fear. Ahsoka joined him at the window, her young face thoughtful. You're different from other warriors I've met. You don't seem to enjoy the fighting. I don't, T'Challa confirmed. Violence should never be celebrated, Ahsoka. It should be mourned and used only when absolutely necessary. Every life taken, even an enemy's life, is a tragedy. The moment you start enjoying it, the moment you start seeking it out, you become the very thing you're fighting against. Master Anakin says similar things, Ahsoka said. But I can tell it bothers him. The killing, the war. Sometimes I think it's eating at him. Then he's still human, T'Challa said. Still connected to his compassion. That's good. The day it stops bothering him is the day he should stop being a warrior. Mace Windu approached them, his expression one of respect and something that might have been friendship. The Council has been discussing your role in this war, T'Challa. Your tactical insights were invaluable, your combat effectiveness beyond question, and your moral compass. We could use more of that. The Jedi Order would like to formalize our alliance, make you an official strategic advisor. And in return, T'Challa asked. In return, we dedicate resources to finding a way to send you home, Mace replied. The Force brought you here, and we believe the Force can return you. But it will take time, research, and cooperation. Will you help us end this war while we search for answers? T'Challa looked out at Ryloth's liberated people, thought of all the other worlds suffering under separatist occupation, considered the Jedi struggling to maintain their principles in an impossible situation. He thought of Wakanda, of his responsibilities there, but also of his father's teachings, that a true king serves all who need him, not just his own people. I'll help, he said, but on one condition. These clone troopers, they're soldiers, yes, but they're also people. They deserve to be treated as individuals, not as property. I want your commitment that the Republic will work toward giving them rights, identity, citizenship when this war ends. The request clearly surprised the Jedi. Mace and Obi-Wan exchanged glances, and T'Challa could see the ethical considerations playing out across their faces. That's complicated, Obi-Wan said carefully. The clones were created for the war effort. The legal status, if they bleed, if they think, if they can choose to be brave or cowardly, then they're people, T'Challa interrupted firmly. And people deserve rights. I won't be complicit in a system that treats sentient beings as disposable tools, no matter how you justify it. If we're fighting for freedom, then that freedom must extend to everyone. Mace Windu was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're right. We've been so focused on winning the war that we haven't thought about what comes after. I can't promise the Senate will agree, but I can promise that the Jedi Order will advocate for clone rights. You have my word. Then you have my alliance, T'Challa said, extending his hand. As they shook, sealing the agreement, T'Challa felt the presence of his ancestors more strongly than he had since arriving in this galaxy. They approved. They understood. This was what it meant to be the Black Panther, to fight not just for your own people, but for justice itself, wherever it was needed. The liberation of Ryloth was complete. The Separatists had been driven off, their commander captured, their hold broken, and in the process, The Jedi had gained an ally unlike any they'd ever known. A king from another reality who brought wisdom forged in Wakanda's isolationist history and skills honed through countless battles. But as the sun set over Lesu, casting long shadows across the liberated city, T'Challa couldn't shake the feeling that something larger was at play. The war felt wrong somehow, orchestrated, like both sides were dancing to someone else's tune. He'd seen political manipulation before, had dealt with enemies who worked in shadows rather than open battle. Someone was pulling strings, and T'Challa was determined to find out who. 3 weeks after the liberation of Ryloth, T'Challa stood in the Jedi Temple's holographic war room, studying battle reports from across the galaxy. The Clone Wars were consuming world after world, and the more he learned about the conflict, the more something fundamental bothered him. The patterns were wrong, too convenient, too balanced. For every Republic victory, the Separatists scored an equivalent success. For every strategic advantage one side gained, the other mysteriously countered it. "You see it too," Mace Windu said, entering the chamber. The Jedi Master had become something of a confidant to T'Challa over the past weeks, their similar philosophical approaches to warfare creating a mutual respect. "This war doesn't make sense," T'Challa replied, gesturing at the holographic display. "Look at the resource distribution. The Separatists lose a fleet here, but somehow acquire the materials to build another there. The Republic secures a supply line, but intelligence on that route immediately leaks to the enemy. It's as if someone wants the war to continue." Mace finished grimly. "The Council has had similar concerns, but we can't identify the source. Every lead ends in dead ends or misdirection. In Wakanda, when we faced an enemy we couldn't see, we looked not at what they did, but at who benefited from their actions," T'Challa said thoughtfully. "Who benefits from this war dragging on? Who gains power from both sides fighting?" Before Mace could answer, an alarm resonated through the temple. Anakin's voice crackled over the comms, tight with urgency. "Masters, we have a situation. Chancellor Palpatine has been taken hostage by General Grievous. They're holding him aboard the Invisible Hand above Coruscant. The Separatist fleet is in orbit. This is a full-scale assault on the capital." T'Challa and Mace raced to the temple's command center, where chaos reigned. Through the viewport, he could see Separatist warships engaging Republic forces directly above the planet's surface. Explosions lit up the sky like deadly fireworks, and burning debris was already beginning to fall toward the city below. "How did they get this close?" T'Challa demanded. "Coruscant has the most heavily defended space in the Republic. This kind of fleet penetration should be impossible." "It should be," Obi-Wan agreed, arriving with Ahsoka. The Jedi Master's face was troubled. Someone had to have given them access codes, clearance vectors, patrol schedules. This was an inside job. "Or a very convenient distraction," T'Challa muttered, his tactical mind racing. "The Chancellor is the Republic's leader. Capturing him draws every Jedi, every military asset, every resource toward a single objective: rescuing him. While we're all focused on that, the enemy could be doing anything, anywhere," Mace finished, understanding dawning in his eyes. "It's a perfect misdirection. But we can't ignore it," Anakin protested. "The Chancellor must be rescued, yes," T'Challa agreed. "But we need to be smart about this. Not everyone rushes to the rescue. Some of us need to ask why this is happening now, and what else might be occurring while we're distracted." Yoda's voice cut through the debate. "Wisdom, King T'Challa speaks. But rescue the Chancellor, we must. Anakin, Obi-Wan, go. Aboard the Invisible Hand, retrieve him you will. T'Challa, Mace, Ahsoka, remain here. Investigate, you will. Find the truth behind this attack." Anakin looked like he wanted to argue, his connection to the Chancellor clearly strong, but he nodded and rushed toward the hangar with Obi-Wan. T'Challa watched them go, noting the intensity in the young Jedi's eyes, the almost desperate need to save Palpatine. "He's very attached to the Chancellor," T'Challa observed quietly. "Too attached," Mace agreed. "Palpatine has been a mentor to Anakin since he was a child. The bond between them concerns the Council. Attachment leads to fear. Fear leads to being human, T'Challa interrupted gently. With respect, Master Windu. Perhaps the problem isn't Anakin's attachment. Perhaps it's your Order's refusal to acknowledge that attachment is part of what makes people fight for something worth protecting. In Wakanda, we don't suppress love. We channel it. We fight harder for those we care about, and that love makes us stronger, not weaker. Before Mace could respond, Ahsoka called out from a computer terminal. Masters, I'm picking up something strange. During the attack, there were brief communications between the Separatist fleet and somewhere in the Senate building, but the transmission was encrypted with Republic codes. T'Challa moved to examine the data, his enhanced vision scanning the technical readouts. Can you trace the source? Working on it, Ahsoka said, her fingers flying across the controls. But whoever sent this knew how to cover their tracks. This is sophisticated work, military-grade encryption, multiple routing protocols. Whoever's behind this has access to the highest levels of Republic intelligence. Or is the highest levels of Republic intelligence? T'Challa said darkly. Ahsoka, I need you to cross-reference those transmission times with Senate activity logs. Who was in the building during those exact moments? Who had access to secure communications? While Ahsoka worked, T'Challa activated his suit's systems, accessing what remained of its analytical capabilities. The vibranium technology was sophisticated, designed by Shuri to interface with multiple data systems. It took several minutes to adapt to Republic protocols, but eventually, he established a connection. Master Windu, I need authorization to access Republic military records, T'Challa said. Specifically, I want to see every major engagement of this war, timing, outcomes, and who was in command of Republic forces during defeats. Mace provided the access codes without question, trusting T'Challa's instincts. As the data flooded, T'Challa's display, he began seeing patterns that made his blood run cold. Every major Republic defeat had occurred when the Chancellor had personally intervened in military strategy. Every unexpected Separatist advantage had followed shortly after Palpatine had received intelligence briefings. And every Jedi who'd gotten too close to discovering these patterns had been conveniently assigned to dangerous missions. Missions many hadn't survived. Bast preserve us, T'Challa whispered. It's not a Separatist conspiracy. It's a Republic one. Someone at the highest levels is orchestrating both sides of this war. That's impossible, Mace said, but his voice lacked conviction. Who could possibly? I've got something, Ahsoka interrupted. The transmission originated from the Chancellor's private office, but that doesn't make sense. The Chancellor was already captured by then. Unless he wasn't, T'Challa finished, the pieces falling into place with terrible clarity. Unless his capture was staged. Unless Palpatine himself is the one pulling the strings. The accusation hung in the air like a physical thing. Mace Windu's face went through a series of emotions: disbelief, denial, and finally, terrible understanding. The Sith Lord, Mace said slowly. We've known there's a Sith Master orchestrating everything, but we've never been able to identify him. We assumed it was someone in the Separatist leadership, someone like Dooku's master. But if it's Palpatine, then the Republic has been fighting a war against itself, T'Challa said. And the Jedi have been his tools, used to eliminate his enemies and consolidate his power. Every battle you fight, every world you conquer, you're not defending the Republic. You're building his empire. Ahsoka looked stricken. Master Anakin and Master Obi-Wan, they're walking into a trap. T'Challa was already moving toward the exit. We need to warn them. Now, if Palpatine is the Sith Lord and they rescue him, he'll have them exactly where he wants them. They raced toward the hangar, Mace coordinating with Republic forces while T'Challa opened a comm channel to Anakin's fighter. Static greeted him. The battle above was creating too much interference for clear communication. We need to get up there, T'Challa said, spotting a Republic gunship. Can you fly one of these? Better question, Ahsoka said, already climbing into the pilot's seat. Can you hold on? The flight up through Coruscant's atmosphere was harrowing. Separatist fighters swarmed around them, forcing Ahsoka to execute maneuvers that would have killed a normal pilot. T'Challa held on, his enhanced physiology helping him withstand the extreme G-forces, while Mace used the Force to reinforce the ship's shields. The invisible hand loomed above them, a massive Providence-class carrier, its hull scarred by turbo-laser impacts. As they approached, a wing of vulture droids peeled off to intercept them. "I'll handle them," Ahsoka called, back, and proved she was every bit the pilot her master was, weaving through the incoming fire with skill that bordered on precognitive. They docked in one of the carrier's damaged hangar bays, where Republic boarding parties were already fighting through waves of battle droids. T'Challa led the way, his stealth mode allowing him to scout ahead while Mace and Ahsoka followed, using the Force to sense danger before it materialized. The corridors of the invisible hand were chaos. Droids, clone troopers, small fires from battle damage, and the constant vibration of the ship's engines. T'Challa's enhanced hearing picked up sounds of lightsaber combat ahead, and he increased his pace. They found Anakin and Obi-Wan in the ship's command center, facing off against Count Dooku. The Sith Lord looked weakened since their last encounter. T'Challa could see the corruption that the crystal shards had left on him, dark veins still visible on his exposed skin. But he was still dangerous, his crimson lightsaber weaving patterns of death as he held off both Jedi Masters. And behind Dooku, bound in a chair but strangely calm, sat Chancellor Palpatine. "T'Challa!" Obi-Wan called out, deflecting one of Dooku's strikes. "What are you doing here?" "Stopping a trap," T'Challa shouted back. He locked eyes with Palpatine, and in that moment, he saw it. The subtle smile, the satisfaction in the Chancellor's gaze, the look of a predator watching his prey walk into a carefully laid snare. "Anakin, listen to me," T'Challa called out, moving to flank Dooku. "This whole thing is a setup. The Chancellor is in danger," Anakin snapped, his attacks on Dooku intensifying. "We need to save him." Dooku laughed, a sound without humor. "Save him? You fool, you're not saving him, you're serving him." The Sith Lord's attention shifted to T'Challa, recognition flashing in his eyes. "You, the one who destroyed my crystal. My master was most displeased. He wants you dealt with personally." "Then your master is welcome to try," T'Challa replied, extending his claws. What followed was a battle unlike anything T'Challa had experienced. Dooku was a master duelist, his centuries of training evident in every movement. But T'Challa had fought gods and monsters, had faced down threats that would have destroyed lesser warriors. His vibranium suit absorbed the glancing lightsaber strikes, while his enhanced speed kept him just ahead of Dooku's blade. Mace and Ahsoka joined the fight, their lightsabers adding to the chaos. But T'Challa noticed something. Palpatine was no longer bound. The restraints lay on the floor, cut cleanly, and the Chancellor was backing toward an exit, his face a mask of concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. "He's escaping!" T'Challa shouted, breaking away from Dooku to pursue. Anakin moved to intercept T'Challa, his lightsaber raised defensively. "Stand down! The Chancellor needs protection!" "The Chancellor is the enemy," T'Challa insisted. "Anakin, please, you have to trust me. Everything about this war, all of it has been orchestrated by—" A wave of Force energy slammed into T'Challa, sending him crashing into a bulkhead. Through his blurred vision, he saw Palpatine's hand extended, and for just a moment, the carefully maintained facade slipped. Lightning arced between the Chancellor's fingers, and his face twisted with malevolent pleasure. "Anakin," Palpatine said, his voice taking on a different quality. Older, darker, more powerful. "Kill Count Dooku. Show the Jedi what true power looks like. Show them you're strong enough to do what must be done." "What?" Anakin looked confused, horrified. "Chancellor, I can't just execute. He's a war criminal," Palpatine hissed. "He's responsible for countless deaths. The Jedi Code may say you should show mercy, but what has mercy accomplished? How many more will die if you let him live? Do it, Anakin. Strike him down." T'Challa watched in horror as Anakin's face went through a series of emotions: doubt, anger, determination. The young Jedi's lightsaber rose, and Dooku, exhausted from fighting multiple opponents, fell to his knees. "Anakin, don't!" Obi-Wan shouted. "This isn't the Jedi way." But Anakin's blade came down, and Dooku's head rolled free. The ship shuddered, and alarms began wailing. The invisible hand was breaking apart, its superstructure compromised by the ongoing battle. They had minutes, perhaps less, before the entire vessel came apart. "We need to evacuate," Mace shouted. "Everyone back to the hangar!" In the chaos of the evacuation, as the ship groaned and split, T'Challa caught Palpatine's eyes one more time. The Chancellor smiled, a cold, calculating expression that confirmed every suspicion. "We'll speak again, King T'Challa," Palpatine said softly, his voice carrying despite the noise around them. "I'm very interested in your perspective. Someone who sees patterns others miss could be very valuable, or very dangerous." "I know what you are," T'Challa replied, his voice equally quiet. "And I will expose you." "Will you?" Palpatine's smile widened. "Against what evidence? Against whose word? You're an outsider, a stranger from another reality. Who will believe you when you accuse the Republic's beloved Chancellor of treason?" T'Challa wanted to respond, to argue, but Mace was pulling him toward the escape pods, and the ship was coming apart around them. They barely made it to the hangar, barely launched before the invisible hand broke in half and began its descent toward Coruscant's surface. Back at the temple, in the aftermath of the battle, T'Challa stood before the Jedi Council with Mace Windu and presented his evidence. The transmission data, the pattern analysis, the convenient timing of Republic defeats, all of it pointed to a conspiracy at the highest levels. "Troubling, this information is," Yoda said, his ancient face creased with concern. "But prove Palpatine's involvement. It does not. Circumstantial, the evidence remains." "Then we gather more evidence," T'Challa insisted. "We investigate properly, build a case that can't be denied." "And in the meantime?" Ki-Adi-Mundi asked. "The Chancellor has just survived an assassination attempt. His political power is at its peak. The Senate worships him as a hero. If we move against him without ironclad proof, we'll be branded as traitors." "Then we be branded as traitors," T'Challa said, his frustration evident. "In Wakanda, we have a saying, 'A king who does not serve his people is no king at all.' If your republic is being led by a Sith Lord, if everything you're fighting for is a lie, then isn't it your duty to act, regardless of political consequences?" The council was silent, and T'Challa could see the conflict on their faces. They knew he was right, but they were also trapped by their own code, their own rules, the political realities of a republic that depended on them but also constrained them. "We'll investigate," Mace finally said. Quietly, carefully. "T'Challa, you're right about the patterns, and we'd be fools to ignore them. But we need more. We need proof that even the Senate can't deny." It was a compromise, and T'Challa hated compromises when lives were at stake. But he also understood political reality. He'd been a king long enough to know that sometimes you had to move slowly to move surely. Over the following days, T'Challa worked with Mace Windu to compile evidence. They traced financial transactions, analyzed battle reports, interviewed survivors of suspicious engagements. Slowly, painstakingly, they built a case. But Palpatine was always one step ahead. Evidence disappeared. Witnesses recanted. And gradually, T'Challa realized they were fighting a battle they couldn't win. Not through investigation, not through legal means. Palpatine controlled too much, had infiltrated too deeply, had spent decades positioning himself for this moment. One evening, T'Challa found Anakin alone in one of the temple's meditation chambers. The young Jedi sat in darkness, his face troubled, his hands trembling slightly. "I killed him," Anakin said without preamble. "Dooku. I executed him because the Chancellor told me to." "I know," T'Challa said, sitting beside him. "I was there. It was wrong," Anakin continued, his voice breaking. "The Jedi Code says we don't kill unarmed prisoners, but the Chancellor said it was necessary, that it was justice, and I wanted to believe him. I wanted to be strong enough to do what others couldn't. Strength isn't measured by your willingness to kill, Anakin, T'Challa said gently. It's measured by your wisdom to know when violence is necessary and when it's murder. What you did today, that was murder. The Chancellor manipulated you into compromising your principles. Why? Anakin asked, his eyes pleading. Why would he do that? He's been like a father to me. He's guided me, supported me when the Council wouldn't. Why would he want me to fall? Because that's what predators do, T'Challa replied. They isolate their prey, separate them from the herd, make them dependent, and when the time is right, they strike. Palpatine isn't your friend, Anakin. He's using you for something. I don't know what yet, but I intend to find out. Anakin was quiet for a long moment, then stood abruptly. I need to think. Alone. As the young Jedi walked away, T'Challa felt a chill run down his spine. He'd seen that look before, in the eyes of warriors pushed too far, asked to compromise too much, standing at the edge of an abyss they couldn't see. He thought of his own moment of crisis, when he'd faced Killmonger and questioned everything he believed about Wakanda's isolationism. He'd been forced to evolve or die, to change or be destroyed. Anakin was facing a similar crucible, but unlike T'Challa, who'd had family and friends to pull him back from the edge, Anakin seemed increasingly isolated, increasingly dependent on the one person T'Challa was certain was the enemy. That night, T'Challa stood on one of the temple's highest platforms, looking out over Coruscant's glittering expanse. Somewhere in that sea of lights, Palpatine was planning his next move. Somewhere out there, a Sith Lord was positioning his pieces for a final, devastating strike. And T'Challa, King of Wakanda, defender of his people, stood in a galaxy not his own, trying to prevent a catastrophe he could see coming but couldn't yet stop. Bast, guide me, he whispered to the alien stars. Show me how to fight an enemy who controls everything, who's already won before the battle even begins. The stars offered no answer. But T'Challa hadn't survived this long by waiting for divine intervention. He'd survived by being smart, by being adaptable, by refusing to give up even when the odds were impossible. Palpatine thought he'd already won. He thought he'd accounted for every variable, planned for every contingency. But he hadn't planned for T'Challa, and that, the King of Wakanda decided, would be his advantage. He was the unknown variable in Palpatine's equation, the piece that didn't fit the pattern. And he would use that unpredictability to expose the truth, to save the Jedi, and to prevent the fall of the Republic. The Jedi Council chamber felt different now. Oppressive, tense, filled with an awareness that the enemy they'd been fighting for years might be sitting in plain sight at the heart of the Republic. T'Challa stood before the assembled masters, Mace Windu beside him, presenting their final evidence. 3 months of investigation, T'Challa said, his voice steady despite the gravity of what he was revealing. And every trail leads back to one person. Chancellor Palpatine has orchestrated this entire war. He's been playing both sides, manipulating the Republic and the Separatists, engineering a crisis that gives him unprecedented emergency powers. On the holographic display, data streams flowed. Financial records showing connections between Palpatine's inner circle and Separatist banking clans. Communications intercepts revealing coded messages between the Chancellor's office and known Sith operatives. Timeline analyses showing how every major escalation of the war benefited Palpatine politically. The pattern is undeniable, Mace added, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd come to accept a terrible truth. We've been fighting his war, eliminating his enemies, consolidating his power, and now he's positioned to make his final move. What move? Obi-Wan asked, though T'Challa could see the Jedi Master already suspected the answer. The destruction of the Jedi Order, T'Challa said bluntly. He spent years turning public opinion against you, painting you as failures, as warmongers, as obstacles to peace. The moment he declares the war over, declares himself the victor, he'll have the political capital to eliminate you entirely. And the clone army you've come to depend on, they were created in secret, their loyalty programmed at a genetic level. To whom do you think that loyalty truly belongs? The silence that followed was deafening. Every Jedi in the chamber felt the truth of T'Challa's words, the terrible logic that explained so many inconsistencies, so many convenient coincidences. "Confront him, we must," Yoda said finally, his ancient voice heavy with sorrow. "But carefully. Evidence we have, but proof that will satisfy the Senate, we do not. Move against him openly, and martyrs we make ourselves. Justify everything he's planned to do to us, we will. Then we don't move openly," T'Challa said. "We do what I've done in Wakanda when facing enemies who controlled the political landscape. We expose them, force them to reveal themselves, make them act in ways that show their true nature to everyone watching." "You're suggesting we bait him," Mace said thoughtfully. "Force his hand before he's ready." "Exactly," T'Challa confirmed. "Palpatine thinks he's in control. He thinks he's accounted for every variable. But he doesn't know about me, not really. He doesn't understand what I represent, what I've learned from fighting tyrants in my own world. We use that. We make him think his plans are threatened in a way he can't ignore, can't delegate, can't solve through political maneuvering." "And how do we do that?" Ki-Adi-Mundi asked. T'Challa's expression hardened with determination. "We threaten the thing he values most, his control over Anakin Skywalker." The reaction was immediate. Several council members shifted uncomfortably, and Obi-Wan actually stood from his seat. "Anakin is my Padawan, my brother in all but blood," Obi-Wan protested. "I won't use him as bait." "We're not using him," T'Challa clarified. "We're saving him. Palpatine has been grooming Anakin for years, isolating him, making him dependent, pushing him toward the dark side. Why? What's so special about Anakin that a Sith Lord would invest decades in corrupting him?" "The prophecy," Yoda said quietly. "The chosen one who will bring balance to the Force. Strong in the Force, Anakin is. Perhaps the strongest we have ever seen. If turned to the dark side, if made a Sith, he'd be unstoppable," T'Challa finished. "A weapon Palpatine could use to cement his power, to hunt down any remaining Jedi, to enforce his new order. That's why Palpatine has been so careful with him, so patient. Anakin isn't just another Jedi, he's the key to everything." Mace Windu's expression shifted to grim understanding. "So if we can show Anakin the truth, if we can break Palpatine's hold on him before the final move, then Palpatine loses his ultimate weapon," T'Challa said. "And he'll be forced to act prematurely, to reveal himself before all his pieces are in position. That's when we strike, not against the political figure, but against the Sith Lord. In self-defense, with witnesses, in a way that leaves no doubt about what he truly is." The plan was risky, more than risky. It was dangerous in ways that could backfire catastrophically. But as T'Challa looked around at the council, he saw the same determination he'd felt when facing Killmonger, when choosing to open Wakanda to the world despite centuries of tradition demanding otherwise. Sometimes the right choice was also the hardest one. "I'll speak to Anakin," Obi-Wan said finally. "He trusts me. If anyone can reach him, show him what Palpatine really is." "No," T'Challa interrupted gently. "It has to be me." "You?" Obi-Wan looked skeptical. "You've only known him for a few months. Why would he listen to you over someone who's been his mentor for over a decade?" "Because I'm not part of the system that's failed him," T'Challa explained. "Anakin feels constrained by the Jedi Code, judged by the Council, held back from his potential. You represent that system, Obi-Wan, no matter how much he loves you. But me, I'm an outsider who's shown him a different way. A warrior who embraces attachment, who fights for those he loves, who doesn't hide his emotions. I can reach him in ways you can't." It was a hard truth, and T'Challa could see it hurt Obi-Wan to hear it. But the Jedi Master was wise enough to recognize its validity. "Very well," Obi-Wan said quietly. "But I'm coming with you, hidden, watching. If something goes wrong, then you intervene," T'Challa agreed. "I wouldn't have it any other way." T'Challa found Anakin in the temple's combat training room, working through lightsaber forms with an intensity that bordered on violence. Each strike, each parry, carried more force than necessary, and T'Challa could see the conflict written in every movement. "Anakin," he called out, entering the room. "We need to talk." The young Jedi didn't stop, his blue blade continuing its deadly dance. "Not now, T'Challa. I'm not in the mood for philosophical discussions." "This isn't philosophy," T'Challa said, moving closer but staying out of range of the lightsaber. "It's about your future, about the choices you're going to have to make very soon." Anakin finally stopped, deactivating his weapon and turning to face T'Challa. The young man's face was haggard, exhausted, and T'Challa could see the toll the war was taking on him. "What choices?" Anakin asked warily. "The Chancellor has been visiting you more frequently," T'Challa observed, "confiding in you, asking you to do things that make you uncomfortable, things that contradict your Jedi training." Anakin's expression hardened defensively. "The Chancellor is my friend. He understands things the Council doesn't. He doesn't hold me back or judge me for being human," T'Challa interrupted. "For having emotions, attachments, fears. Of course he doesn't judge you for those things, Anakin. He's encouraging them, feeding them, using them to drive a wedge between you and the Order." "That's ridiculous." Anakin snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. "Why would he do that?" "Because he's a Sith Lord," T'Challa said bluntly. "Because everything you fought against in this war, the manipulation, the cruelty, the orchestrated chaos, it all comes from him. Palpatine is the enemy, Anakin. He always has been." For a moment, T'Challa thought Anakin might attack him. The young Jedi's hand moved toward his lightsaber, his face contorting with rage and denial. But then something broke. Some final barrier that had been holding back the doubt, the questions, the nagging feeling that something was deeply wrong. "Prove it," Anakin said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Prove he's a Sith Lord, and I'll believe you." T'Challa activated a holographic projector built into his suit, displaying the evidence he and Mace had compiled. He walked Anakin through it all. The financial connections, the communications intercepts, the patterns of manipulation. He showed how Palpatine had orchestrated the war, how he'd positioned himself to eliminate the Jedi, how he'd been grooming Anakin specifically for years. "He's been like a father to me," Anakin said, his voice breaking. "When the Council doubted me, when they held me back, he was the one who believed in me. How can all of that be a lie?" "It's not a lie," T'Challa said gently. "The emotions are real. Palpatine does value you, does see your potential. But he values you as a weapon, not as a person. He sees what you could become if you surrender to anger, to fear, to the dark side. And he's been carefully pushing you toward that surrender." "Why?" Anakin demanded. "Why me specifically?" "Because you're the chosen one," T'Challa replied. "Because you have more raw power than any Jedi in history. Because if Palpatine can turn you, corrupt you, make you his apprentice, then no one in the galaxy could stop him. You're not just another Jedi to him, Anakin. You're the key to his ultimate victory." Anakin sank onto a training bench, his face in his hands. "I've been so blind. All the things he's asked me to do, the way he's talked about the Jedi, the hints about power beyond what the Order teaches. I saw it, but I didn't want to believe it." "Because you wanted a father figure," T'Challa said, sitting beside him. "Because you wanted someone who accepted you without judgment. There's no shame in that, Anakin. But now you know the truth. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Before Anakin could answer, both their communicators activated simultaneously. Mace Windu's urgent voice filled the training room. "All Jedi to defensive positions. Palpatine has just declared the formation of the Galactic Empire. He's issued Order 66. The clones are turning on us. This is not a drill. The clones are executing Jedi across the galaxy." T'Challa's blood ran cold. They'd been too slow, too careful. Palpatine had made his move while they were still gathering evidence, still trying to do things the right way. And now Jedi were dying. "We need to get to the council chamber," T'Challa said, already moving. But Anakin grabbed his arm. "The Chancellor, Palpatine, he told me he could save people from death, that he knew secrets the Jedi had forgotten. I didn't understand then, but now. He was talking about Sith powers, wasn't he?" about using the dark side to manipulate life itself. Probably, T'Challa confirmed. Why? Because Padme is pregnant, Anakin said, anguish written across his face. And I've been having visions, terrible visions of her dying in childbirth. Palpatine said he could teach me to save her, that the Jedi way couldn't help her, but his way could. That's why I've been so conflicted. I'd do anything to save her, T'Challa. Anything. T'Challa understood in that moment how close they'd come to losing Anakin entirely. If Palpatine had made his move just a few days earlier, if this conversation hadn't happened, Anakin would have turned to save the woman he loved. The Sith Lord had been playing a perfect game, exploiting every vulnerability, every fear. Then we save her, T'Challa said firmly, but not by surrendering to darkness. We save her by being smart, by being strong, by fighting for what's right. And right now, that means stopping Palpatine before he kills every Jedi in the galaxy. They ran through the temple corridors, and the sounds of battle were already echoing through the ancient halls. Clone troopers, the same soldiers who'd fought beside the Jedi for years, were now hunting them, their inhibitor chips activated, their programming overriding any loyalty or friendship they'd developed. T'Challa saw younglings being herded by Jedi masters toward escape routes, saw knights fighting desperately against soldiers they'd once called brothers, saw the horror of betrayal written across every face. "The hangar!" Ahsoka's voice called out as she ran toward them, her lightsabers deflecting blaster fire. "Master Windu is holding it, but we need to evacuate now." They fought their way through the temple, T'Challa's vibranium suit absorbing countless blaster bolts, while Anakin and Ahsoka's lightsabers created a whirlwind of defense. At the hangar, Mace Windu stood like a sentinel, his purple blade moving with lethal precision as he held off wave after wave of clone troopers. "Anakin," Mace called out when he saw them. "We need to—" The hangar doors exploded inward, and through the smoke stepped Chancellor Palpatine. But he was no longer the kindly old politician. His face was twisted with malevolent pleasure, his robes exchanged for dark Sith attire, and lightning crackled between his fingers. "Anakin, my boy," Palpatine said, his voice distorted by dark side corruption. "I'm so pleased you're here. Come to my side, and together we can save Padme. Together we can rule this galaxy as master and apprentice." For a terrible moment, T'Challa thought Anakin might actually go to him. The young Jedi's face was torn with conflict, his eyes moving between Palpatine and the assembled Jedi, between the promise of saving his wife and the reality of what that salvation would cost. "No," Anakin said finally, his voice gaining strength. "T'Challa showed me the truth. You've been manipulating me from the beginning, using my fears, my attachments, my desire to protect those I love. But I'm done being your pawn." Palpatine's expression shifted to rage. "You fool! I offered you power beyond measure. I could have made you the greatest Sith Lord in history. And you throw it away for what? For Jedi dogma? For their pathetic code?" "Not for the code," Anakin replied, igniting his lightsaber. "For the people I love. For the galaxy that deserves better than your tyranny. And because someone showed me that you can embrace your emotions, fight for what matters, without surrendering to darkness." He glanced at T'Challa, and in that moment, T'Challa saw the warrior Anakin could become. Not a Sith, not even a traditional Jedi, but something new. Something that balanced passion and wisdom, attachment and duty. Palpatine raised his hands, and Force lightning erupted outward in a devastating wave. Mace and Anakin met it with their lightsabers, absorbing and deflecting the dark side energy. But the power was overwhelming, pushing them back step by step. T'Challa moved. His vibranium suit was designed to absorb kinetic energy, but he discovered during his time in this galaxy that it worked on other forms of energy too. He stepped directly into the lightning's path, and his suit drank it in, storing the electrical energy, converting it into power he could redirect. "Impossible," Palpatine snarled. "What are you?" "I'm T'Challa, King of Wakanda," he replied, feeling the energy building in his suit to dangerous levels. "And in my world, we have a saying. In times of crisis, The wise build bridges, while the foolish build barriers. You've built barriers, Chancellor. You've divided this galaxy, turned friend against friend, created chaos to serve your ambition. Now let me show you what happens when someone builds a bridge instead. He released the stored energy in a single, focused pulse. Not as lightning, but as pure kinetic force. The shockwave slammed into Palpatine, sending the Sith Lord flying backward. It wasn't enough to kill him. Palpatine was too powerful, too skilled in the Force. But it broke his attack, gave the Jedi time to regroup. "Everyone to the ships," Mace commanded. "We need to get off-world, regroup, figure out how many of us survived." As Jedi began evacuating, as ships lifted off carrying survivors and younglings, T'Challa stood with Anakin and Mace, holding the line against Palpatine and the approaching clone army. "This isn't over!" Palpatine screamed, his face contorted with rage. "I will hunt you across the galaxy. Every Jedi will die. Every enemy of the Empire will be destroyed." "Perhaps," T'Challa replied calmly, "but not today. Today, we survive. Today, we fight back. And today, you will learn that not every variable in your equation behaves the way you expect." They retreated to the last evacuation ship, blaster fire following them up the boarding ramp. As the ship lifted off and Coruscant fell away beneath them, T'Challa looked at the assembled survivors: Mace, Obi-Wan, Yoda, Ahsoka, Anakin, and perhaps 100 other Jedi who'd managed to escape the initial purge. Not enough, nowhere near enough, but alive. And while they lived, there was hope. "Where do we go?" Ahsoka asked, her young face showing the trauma of watching her entire world collapse in a single day. "Somewhere we can regroup," Mace said. "Somewhere Palpatine won't think to look." "I know a place," T'Challa said quietly. "In my world, when Wakanda needed to hide, to preserve its people and culture against overwhelming enemies, we had protocols, ways of disappearing, of protecting what mattered while we built strength to fight another day. I can teach you those protocols. I can help you survive." Yoda looked at him with those ancient, knowing eyes. "Came here by accident, you did. Or so we thought. But perhaps the Force had a purpose. Perhaps needed you were, for this very moment. Perhaps," T'Challa acknowledged. "Or perhaps I'm just a king doing what kings do, protecting those who need protection, fighting for justice wherever I find myself. Either way, I'm with you, until we find a way to send me home, or until Palpatine is defeated, whichever comes first." Anakin approached, his expression one of profound gratitude. "You saved me. If you hadn't shown me the truth, I would have become what he wanted. I would have helped him destroy everything." "You saved yourself," T'Challa corrected gently. "I just gave you the information. You made the choice, the hardest choice, between what you wanted and what was right. That's not something I can teach. That's something you already had inside you." As the ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying them away from Coruscant and the newly formed Galactic Empire, T'Challa stood at a viewport and looked back at the galaxy's capital world. Somewhere down there, Palpatine was consolidating his power, hunting survivors, beginning his reign of terror. But he'd failed to capture or corrupt Anakin Skywalker. He'd failed to eliminate the Jedi completely. And he'd made an enemy of someone who understood tyranny in all its forms, who'd fought dictators and won, who wouldn't stop until justice was served. The Clone Wars were over. The Age of the Empire had begun. But so had the Resistance. And T'Challa, King of Wakanda, the Black Panther, stood ready to lead it. Not because this was his galaxy or his war, but because some causes transcended boundaries, some evils demanded opposition, and some fights were worth having no matter where you found yourself. Somewhere, Bast watched over him. Somewhere, his ancestors' spirits whispered guidance. And somewhere, in a reality he could no longer reach, Wakanda endured without its king. But he would find his way home eventually. He had to believe that, had to trust that the Force, or Bast, or whatever cosmic power had brought him here, would eventually show him the path back. Until then, he had work to do, a galaxy to save, an empire to resist, and a new fellowship of warriors who'd learned that strength came not just from power, but from the wisdom to know when to fight, when to yield, and when to stand firm against darkness no matter the cost. "Wakanda forever," T'Challa whispered to the stars, and the stars, in their infinite wisdom, seemed to whisper back, "May the Force be with you." The Jedi Order, scattered but unbroken, rebuilt itself in the shadows of Palpatine's empire. Under T'Challa's strategic guidance, they established hidden sanctuaries on remote worlds, protected Force-sensitive children from Inquisitors, and began building a network of resistance cells that would one day grow into the Rebel Alliance. The King of Wakanda brought tactical wisdom earned through centuries of his nation's history: how to hide in plain sight, how to preserve culture under oppression, how to fight a guerrilla war against overwhelming force. Anakin Skywalker never became Darth Vader. Instead, he became something the galaxy had never seen: a gray Jedi who embraced both attachment and discipline, who fought with passion but without falling to darkness. His relationship with Padme flourished in the safety of the hidden Jedi enclaves, and when their twins, Luke and Leia, were born, they grew up knowing both parents, learning from both Jedi wisdom and Wakandan philosophy. T'Challa's alliance with the Jedi fundamentally altered the trajectory of galactic history. Where once the Empire might have reigned for decades unopposed, now it faced coordinated resistance from the beginning. Mace Windu and T'Challa formed a command partnership that combined Force abilities with strategic brilliance, while Obi-Wan and Ahsoka trained new generations of Jedi who understood that true strength came from community, not isolation. The search for a way to return T'Challa to his own reality continued. Jedi scholars pored over ancient texts, exploring Force anomalies and dimensional rifts. But as years passed, as T'Challa watched Luke and Leia grow into powerful Force users, as he helped Anakin find balance between love and duty, as he guided the rebellion from scattered cells into a unified front against tyranny, he began to understand something profound. Perhaps he wasn't meant to return. Perhaps his arrival hadn't been an accident, but a purpose. The Force itself recognizing that this galaxy, at this crucial moment, needed someone who understood both isolation and intervention, who could show the Jedi a different path, who could save Anakin Skywalker from a darkness that would have consumed him. He thought of Wakanda often, wondered if time moved differently between realities, if his absence was measured in days or decades in his home universe. He trusted Shuri to lead in his absence, trusted Okoye to protect the kingdom, trusted that Wakanda would endure as it always had. But here, now, in this galaxy far from home, T'Challa had found a new purpose. He'd formed bonds with warriors who understood sacrifice, had helped preserve an ancient order that stood for justice, had prevented one of history's greatest heroes from becoming its greatest villain. The war against the Empire would be long. Palpatine's power was vast, his cruelty unlimited, his determination absolute. But the resistance had something the Emperor could never anticipate: a king from another reality who'd learned that the smallest nation could change the world, that the most isolated people could make the greatest difference, that true power came not from domination, but from the courage to stand for what was right. And so the Black Panther, King of Wakanda, continued his mission in a galaxy of stars, teaching, fighting, leading, protecting. Not the hero this galaxy expected, but perhaps the one it needed. A bridge between worlds, between philosophies, between the light and the darkness. And somewhere in the infinite expanse of the Force, somewhere in the spiritual realm where Bast's power touched this alien reality, ancestors watched and approved. Their king had honored them, had carried Wakanda's wisdom across the void, had proven that some truths transcended universe.